Hey, today I thought I'd share with you my personal top 10 list of my favourite guitarists of all time. As my cut finger is still too sore to play guitar and so I can't do the demo of the guitar I just unboxed, I thought I'd share my list of favourite guitar players of all time with you. Now I must stress that this is just my own personal list and not a poll I've taken or anything like that. I know your lists will no doubt be very different from mine, as personal taste is very subjective. In fact, I would love to see your top 10 list in the comments section below. I bet there are players that I forgot or overlooked and that I'll kick myself for not including, so please do comment on your top 10 below. This list took about 10 times as long as I thought it would to complete. I added and removed so many choices, although I will say that my number one choice didn't change from the start of the process and remains my number one of all time. However, I don't know if you've ever tried, but ranking players in my list was actually so difficult. Even going to video, there were a couple who I swapped around. Just before we start at number 10, I will say that there were three main reasons for choosing who I have, and that reflects what I feel about guitar in general. I tend to like the innovators on the instrument, so most of my list is populated with people who've taken the guitar in a new direction, either in technique or in my second main criteria, that is, players that move me through their melody, phrasing or technique. I've always preferred great and interesting melodic lines over fast or flashy shredding, and I think that'll become clear. That said, there are also players on my list who shred like the devil himself and can play with blistering speed. Finally, and possibly the most important criteria I used, is guitar players who've majorly influenced my own playing over the years and who I've listened to most when I just want to kick back, enjoy a beer and listen to my favourite bands. So I hope my criteria have proven worthy to you as we dive in to my list. Surprisingly, at number 10 is a player who I wasn't sure would make the list, as I can't honestly say he's been an influence. In fact, when I tell you who it is, you'll understand why, as I don't think anyone can play like this guy because he's so unique. However, given how much I've listened to his music and bands that he's been in, I had to include Steve Vai. From his days with Alcatraz, Dave Lee Roth and Whitesnake, I've loved so many bands he's been in, and his own solo work, which has also regularly got in rotation on my playlist as well. Steve is surely one of the most innovative players of his generation. His early influence by his mentor Frank Zappa has carried through into the way Steve is always fresh and exciting as a player, almost invariably playing outside the lines. In fact, Frank almost took a spot on my list, but Steve pipped him to 10th spot. At number 9, I know I'm going to get really a lot of stick for this and annoy a lot of people, as this guy generally tops pretty much every list of players in magazines and online polls. However, I just don't listen to his music as much as I do the rest of the players higher up on my list, even though he was one of the biggest innovators of all time and arguably a player that changed the paradigm. It is, of course, the mighty Jimi Hendrix. When he burst onto the scene in the early 1960s, he almost single-handedly changed the way players approached the guitar. He was also very prolific and melodic in his songwriting and wrote some incredibly exciting tapestries of tone and tune. He just had to make my list. At 8th place, I've chosen Randy Rhoads, and while he may be one of the many wildcards on my list, in his day I can't think of many who've changed the way rock guitars approached as much as he did. By applying a large dose of his virtuosic classical training to the metal and rock genre, I think he influenced so many who followed to do similarly. In fact, I would say without Randy, we would have no Yngwie, who incidentally didn't make my top 10 list. Before the Randy Rhoads tribute album released by Ozzy, I hadn't actually been that aware of Randy, but once the floodgates were open, I couldn't get enough, hearing him both on Ozzy stuff and also Quiet Riot. The main thing for me with Randy was his amazing feel for melodic phrasing. Listening to tracks like Goodbye to Romance and Quiet Riot's Picking Up the Pieces showed just how varied his tonality and musical ear could be. Like Buddy Holly, I would just love to have seen where he would have taken the music had he lived. At number 7 we have one of the most influential British guitar players of all time, and he is one I'm delighted to say is still with us. Hopefully we still have lots more to hear from him. With a career spanning multiple decades and so many great classic songs written, Eric Clapton has not only influenced so many guitar players who followed him, but also is one of my biggest influence in recent years. It took me a while to appreciate the nuance of his style and fusion of rock and blues, but now he's a major inspiration whenever I get around to writing. As somebody who Hendrix listed as an influence, how can I not put him a couple of places higher on my list? From the John Mayall Bluesbreaker days through supergroup Cream and right through to his later eponymous offerings, Eric has consistently written and put out great songs. For me, his songwriting is possibly the greatest talent he has, but once again it's his unique and beautiful phrasing that pleases me. If you've never heard it, check out his track Edge of Darkness, a tune he wrote for the BBC TV series of the same name. It's purely spine-tingling in its simplicity and beauty. At number 6 we jump forward a few decades to a player who fronted one of my all-time favourite bands. They were so much fun because they never wrote or released a single average song. Nuno Bettencourt from Extreme always keeps me guessing on what on earth he'd play next, and I was always at a loss for how the heck he managed to play it, let alone generate the guitar parts he played. Couple that with a mastery of melody and harmony, as well as being just an all-round super nice guy, and most people can find plenty of reasons to hate him. I, however, loved his playing from the moment I heard it, and he was a huge influence on what I tried to play. I've even been lucky enough to see Extreme every time they've toured the UK, and I hope I've not seen my last. From the frenetic Flight of the Wounded Bumblebee to the rousing beauty of 7 Sundays, Nuno and co have never written a single song I haven't loved, and I can't say that about many other players on my list. At number 5 we have a player that was my very first and earliest favourite guitar player and still remains so close to my heart for his writing in his own band, the Travelling Wilburys, and of course the Fab Four. He is, of course, George Harrison, and for me he's one of the most underrated guitar players of all time. The Beatles wouldn't have become what they did, as far as I'm concerned, had it not been for the amazing playing and spice added by George. And what's more, his contribution to the writing, while never going to compete with the sheer volume of Lennon-McCartney material, was for me among the best the band released. Something, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and Here Comes the Sun always feature in most top Beatles song lists, and when George contributed, it was only with the best songs. The most important thing about George was his selfless pursuit of the perfect thing to play for the song and band rather than himself. His later contributions to the Wilburys and his own tunes such as All Things Must Pass and My Sweet Lord proved beyond a doubt that his talents were equal to his more prolific peers. At number 4, what list would be complete without the king of Live Aid and the virtuoso guitar styling behind the biggest and best glam rock act of all time, the mighty Queen. Brian May is adept at innovative guitar as he is at building them and also achieving a PhD in astrophysics. Once more, it's not only the huge catalogue of incredible compositions he's been responsible for that inspires me, it's also his ability to just come up with the most melodic and pleasing phrasing, both in his rhythm playing as well as lead work. Just like Nuno, I don't think I can conceive of the guitar part that Brian's played that I've not loved, and his writing credits and influencing Queen have been outstanding. For me though, just like George Harrison, Brian has always put the song and the overall band sound before his own ego and playing, and I love that. My next 2 choices will probably shock you, and yet I make no apology for their inclusion, as both of them are absolute masters of melody and phrasing, as well as being innovative and creative. But most of all, they've been huge influences on me as a player and in my appreciation of the guitar. At number 3, the all too often forgotten melodic genius that was Vito Bratta of White Lion. As a young commuter to a job in London's Stock Exchange, my journeys to and from the smoke were rarely without my Walkman and latterly Archos jukebox MP3 player. When White Lion came out on the scene, my lunch break also would be filled up with the amazing Vito riffage and soaring leads. I couldn't get enough of the earworm, almost annoyingly catchy tunes and awesome lead work Vito was capable of. His solo in Wait is possibly my favourite of all time, and even post Eddie, his use of tapping was new, vibrant and melodically beautiful. It's just a shame that he no longer plays due to a wrist injury, such a loss to the music community. So, the penultimate slot on my list could only go to frontman of the original Skid Row, Thin Lizzy guitarist, Gary Moore. For the longest time, Gary's been a huge influence on my playing, above almost everyone else on this list except for the #1 spot. I first got into him during his solo career, and I can still recall the first time my buddy Andy lent me a live recording and I heard Empty Rooms. It still sends a tingle up my spine and all the hairs on my arms stand up thinking about it. Gary was a truly amazing shredder, but it could also make you weep, simply squeezing every drop of tonal juice out of a single note. His masterpiece Parisian Walkways remains one of my all-time favourite songs, and all of his work with Lizzy and Phil Lynott were the best Lizzy years. However, fast forward to some of his final recordings, and when Gary went back to his blues roots, you really heard just how incredible his phrasing was. I put his blues playing right up there with B.B. King, Muddy Waters and Freddie King. I can't believe we would have been gone 10 years next week, and I still miss the chance to see him live whenever I think about it. So before I get to the top spot, I just want to thank you for getting this far in the video. If you've made it this far, please post either your top 10 or at least your top choice of favourite guitarist of all time in the comments section. And if you've enjoyed my list, please give me a like and a thumbs up, and it can't hurt to subscribe either. And if you do subscribe, please hit that notification bell too, so you never miss an upload and so that you can enter my secret Easter egg surprises too. I'm pretty sure, given those that I've listed so far, that you'd have already guessed who my top spot is reserved for. And if you're a frequent supporter of the channel, you will probably have known from the start that my favourite guitar player of all time is of course Eddie Van Halen. This was the first name I typed and was never in doubt as the #1, even when I struggled with the rest of the list. Eddie for me was not only the most innovative player on this list, but is also right up there in terms of melodic playing and definitely in the realm of songwriting. I always struggled to name my favourite Van Halen song because I love them all. Funny enough, despite being an earth-shattering and groundbreaking solo on Van Halen 1, I've never found Eruption to be Eddie's most virtuosic work. His lead playing is way out there and we have never heard anything like it before that. But for me, Eddie's rhythm work is where it's at. For me, his lead work always seems to eclipse it in almost every article I've read, but when you listen to the way Ed leans forward and back on the beat and still manage to play the most catchy riffs you'll ever hear, that's his biggest legacy. That and the penmanship of his songs. I'm a self-confessed Van Hager era fan more than Dave Lee Roth stuff, so 5150, OU812 and Balance are still my favourite albums, mostly because of the vocals. However, I recognise that Ed played some of his best work on Van Halen 1 and 2, as well as of course the record that really propelled them into superstardom, 1984. The 6th of October 2020 was a heartbreaking day for so many of us guitar players, as we lost probably the biggest innovator on guitar for decades, and I personally don't think that there'll ever be another like him. May he rest in peace. So there you have my top 10. I bet I missed some of your favourite players, didn't I? Well, if I did, please don't forget to list them in the comments section, and I look forward to reading them and responding to as many as I can. Thanks so much for watching, and I can't wait to be back with more of the best content I can just as soon as I can. However, in the meantime, my friends, you take good care.